I teach parents to always put yet on the end of something. My kid can't tie his shoes yet. My kid can't take criticism yet. So many parents are like, oh my gosh, when they get in the real world and they have a boss, they can't talk to them like this, right? You're on a journey to be able to build those skills and do that successfully.
Welcome to the Dad Central Show, hosted by Ed Gow Jr. and Drew Solon. We know dads want to see their kids succeed, but they don't always know how to get there. This show gives dads the tools they need to raise confident and successful kids.
Hey, what is up, everybody? It's Ed Gow Jr. of Dad Central and the master of the hockey rink.
Oh, what are you talking about? Remember I said we're not talking about that anymore on the show. I am Drew Solon of Dad Central. Looking forward to another great conversation with you today, Ed. How's it going in your world?
What's going on in my world? A lot of things. It being Black History Month, been out doing a lot of sharing with a lot of different audiences and organizations. Also meeting a lot of dads at this time of month from the African community. I actually met a gentleman the other day who's a African-American historian, has 8 children, 6 between him and his wife, and they've been married over 40 years. And also he has 2 adopted children from Ghana. And then he has 23 grandchildren.
What the family?
you know,
a legacy there.
Absolutely. So it's quite, and getting a lot of wisdom from him in regards to parenting. Just fantastic. He was like at
patience.
Pardon me?
Mentioned like patience. Did he mention
patience? Yes, but also support from the family, like his brothers. Him and his brother are very, 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 very close. So when it comes, and even as he said to me, he was in Toronto for a few days, and I said, like, how are things going? How's the family? He said, hey, this afternoon at 4:15, he called and made sure his grandkids got home from school and they were doing their homework. Right?
Okay.
So that was good stuff. Before we go any further, the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. What's going on in your world?
Well, we have a lot happening just in the family. And I think it's always interesting when we feel a little bit stretched thin. I'm not sure if anyone listening ever feels stretched thin. You get excited for the new year. There's some energy, and now we're into February, and we're like, where did January go? How are we going to navigate what's going on? So, this is not a stress, but my twin daughters, their birthday is this Friday. And so Chris and I were just talking this morning. I'm not sure why we feel so unprepared. I bought their gifts like a month and a half ago, and it's like an experiential gift. So we're like, we still somehow feel unprepared. Anyways, maybe that's just the plight of a parent of, lots of kids, always feeling sort of stretched and trying to figure out how do I balance all this stuff. So, that's what's going on in our world.
Well, happy birthday. That's fantastic. Good stuff.
Thanks very much. Well, but today we're going to be talking with a new, as you call them, friend of the show.
Yes.
So can you tell us more?
Yes, we're going to be talking with parenting coach for neurodiverse families and the host of the Beautifully Complex. And I'm going to have to ask how that name came about, Penny Williams. And we have her on the Dad Central Show. And Penny is in the house. What is up, Penny?
I am so excited to be here and have this conversation with you guys, because I think that we are going to dive into some tough stuff, but it's stuff that
yes,
we really need to be talking about, right? We need to be normalizing what's going on for our families, parents, and kids.
Wow. Well, you know what? And the wonderful thing is Penny has lived it. Right? She has lived it and then some. But before we get really deep, I just need to find out real quick, how did the name of the podcast come? And then we can get on to the tough stuff.
Yeah. So we started an initiative around behavior a couple of years ago, and we made a manifesto of the neurodiverse family. And one of our tenets of kind of showing up in the ways that our kids need us to is that we are all marvelously imperfect and beautifully complex. Every single one of us has strengths and weaknesses, challenges. We're all just very different, but we're all of equal value almost. Not almost, but that almost, those terms almost say what I'm trying to say there. Um, and so, we just talk a lot on the podcast about neurodiversity, but also about being our authentic selves, setting our kids up for success, and really just honoring who they are and how they show up in the world.
Excellent. Drew, I got my answer. You're good. Go for
Well,
it.
well, thank you for that. I think great setting off point for the conversation because it sounds like that is one the manifesto, but it also sounds like it came from someplace. It came from a
Mhm.
journey. It came from work. It came from trying to figure out how do we move forward in this, in maybe in the way that you envision. So a big part of the show is what's the journey? How did people get to, let's say, creating that manifesto and then living that out? Can you tell us a little bit more about that, how it came to be?
Yeah, yeah. It came to be because my life went in this direction, honestly. Like, I never before having this kid thought about being a parenting coach or anything like that. I had a whole different career going on. And when my son was diagnosed at the age of 6 in 2008 with ADHD, there was just no information for parents. The clinician would hand you a prescription and say, good luck, I'll see you in 6 months. And I clearly what I was doing was not helping because he was struggling so much, both at home and in school. And all of our traditional parenting, everything we learned from growing up ourselves, from our own parents, from our society and culture, was not working for this kid. And he's super intelligent. He has the kindest heart in the world, but he's always in trouble at school. He's always in trouble at home. And when I look back at photos of that time, in most of the photos I have of him, he's crying. He's upset because he could never, ever meet expectations. And what I know now is that I needed to be adjusting my expectations for the kid I had, but I didn't know anything yet, right? And we can only do as good as what we know. When we know better, we're able to do better, which I believe is a Maya Angelou quote that gave me a lot of peace in my parenting, honestly, because there were a lot of regrets. But we we struggled in kindergarten. It wasn't a great environment. We switched schools. He had the most amazing first grade teacher ever, and still the same things were happening. And I was like, okay, we've changed all these factors. There's something going on with him. There's some sort of struggle there. Fast forward, we got an ADHD diagnosis. While we were waiting for that evaluation, I actually started blogging because I wanted somebody to help me and help my kid. And I was reading all of these books obsessively. I would go to the library and come out with a stack of books and read them in the week and try to figure it out and then go back for another because I had to wait months for that evaluation. And I didn't think ADHD fit because if it was an electronic or something he was really into, he could really focus, right? And so I was just out there putting our story out and saying, somebody please help me. Nobody came at that point, but when we got the ADHD diagnosis and I started talking about it on the blog and kept continuing to share our story, droves of parents came, right? Because they were all looking for the same help. And so we had a community going. And as I was trying to help my own kid, I was figuring out what this journey should look like, what changes I could be making, how to help him. And I just didn't like the idea that I was doing all of this work and I was going to be the only one who benefited. And everybody else was going to continue to spend years trying to figure it out. And so I wrote books and started online courses and online conferences and all these other things that have come out of that. And I think, the biggest challenge that I hear from parents is always around behavior. We have a very clear way in our society of looking at behavior, and it is a character judgment. It's either good or bad. If you break a rule, we lock you in a cage. We have no flexibility in even the way that we think about behavior. And that has to change because we know that behavior is a signal. And there's so much science now that backs this up. And, our nervous system gets triggered. and we automatically have a behavior to that because our nervous system feels like we're in danger. And if we just keep down that societal path about behavior, then we see it as a character flaw. We see it as a bad kid or a bad person. We think that, they have chosen to not follow the rules, and so we must punish them. But that's actually just a signal of what is the struggle underneath. We have to work on the struggle underneath if we actually want to make change. We have to see people for who they are, what's really going on for them, and help them. And we're talking a lot more about neurodiversity now. We're getting to a better place. I'm hoping we can sort of fast track it and really start to look at people in a different way, honestly.
Good stuff. I just want to jump in. I know Drew, just really quick. Um, there may be people who are listening or watching this that don't know what neurodiversity is.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
could you, from your lens, give a definition or meaning for the greater populace? Because a lot of people may know, they may hear this, but they may not know.
Typically, what we know is ADHD and autism, right? We most of us know that that goes in that neurodiversity bucket, but really, it's anything that is a difference in the brain, in the neurology, and that wiring that impacts a person negatively. I put anxiety in that bucket. I am a person with anxiety, and it definitely changes the way I look at things, sometimes what I do, what I say, it has a real impact on my life. Things like learning disabilities, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, those sort of things can also go in that bucket. So it's really just like people whose brains work differently and has some sort of impact on their life.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Drew, back to you.
And thanks, Ed, and thank you, Penny. I think there are a few things you brought up that really resonate for me. One
Mhm.
of them was the idea of judgment, and
Mm.
how when we see a particular behavior, we automatically then characterize or put it in a box with this form of judgment. And I think this is I think as a parent, and my role of raising a confident and successful child, the reality is the world that they're going to be going into still does have that judgment. And so, I think it's really important when we're able to recognize that, those things are happening first at home, if they are, and how do we correct that? But also, one of the conversations we had with Dr. Roberto Olivardia, and he's a specialist in
Mhm.
ADHD as well,
Yep.
was preparing his child to face some of the, and it wasn't termed in this, but to face the reality some people may not understand, they may
Mhm.
not get it. They may not have the same compassionate lens, understanding lens that that you want them to have. And so how did he, one of his stories was how he prepared his child to be able to explain a little bit about the differences that he has so a person could understand and relate to him better. And he didn't feel maybe as judged or as ridiculed or less than some of his peers. And anyway, so I just mentioned that because I think it's really important, right? There's a lot of judgment that
Yeah.
comes in, and moving to a place of more compassionate understanding speaks to something that I hold really dear, and is valuing people,
Mhm.
valuing our child, valuing their uniqueness, valuing their giftedness, and seeing them from that lens as opposed to the other lens, a judgmental, critical lens. So maybe I know we're going to get into the specific topic of like avoiding school, and that's a behavior that grabs attention. It's hard for parents, but I'm wondering if you'd be willing to just talk a little bit about the importance of the mindset of a parent
Mhm.
who's dealing with a child with some of these unique elements or neurodiversity that you're talking about.
Yeah, and the mindset is the foundation.
Okay.
As the caring adults in a kid's life, we have to show up in a certain way in order to be able to be effective for them, to help them to be able to navigate that neurotypical world where not everybody gets it, but that they can do that successfully. And so we have to start with opening up our mindset, looking at behavior in this different way. We talk about in our communities either a behavior based lens or a brain based lens. So, that behavior based lens is that judgment lens, right? Judgment and punishment. I call it crime and punishment parenting. And it's the traditional way, it's authoritarian, it's based on control. And I think when we sit down and we analyze that, most of us don't actually want to be that parent. We don't want to raise our kids in that way, but it's all we know. And so we have to shift our mindset more to, in our neurodivergent communities, a brain based lens. How is the difference in my kid's brain affecting this behavior? So, one example could be we'll just take school avoidance, right? If I put that through that behavior based lens, I might think my kid is oppositional, defiant, lazy, unmotivated, doesn't care, right? But if I put it through that brain based lens, I'm asking myself, what is going on that is making it impossible for my child to be able to walk in the door in this building? Is it sensory overwhelm? Is it bullying? Is it social issues? Is it a learning disability and feeling like things are too hard? One thing that it was for my kid was he didn't feel seen, heard, or understood ever. Everyone misunderstood this kid. And so he was being asked a lot and expected a lot to do things where he had hurdles and walls in his way. And it was very detrimental. And it led to, among other things, the school avoidance and refusal. So, we have to take the time to really show up with purpose, to be able to say, this is the parent that I want to be. These are my goals for my kid. And really zoom out with that. Because we often have to either change our expectations for our neurodivergent kids or slide that timeline out. I teach parents to always put yet on the end of something. My kid can't tie his shoes yet. My kid can't, do his homework on his own yet. We're not saying that we don't expect it or that they don't need to do it at some point. My kid can't take criticism yet. So many parents are like, oh my gosh, when they get in the real world and they have a boss, they can't talk to them like this, right? You're not there yet. It's okay. You're on a journey to be able to build those skills and do that successfully. It's okay if they're not there yet. And then we can really zoom out and say, what is my goal here? My goal is to raise a kid who is a happy adult and a successful adult in whatever way they define that. So we're not talking about being a doctor or a lawyer, making lots of money. It's whatever feels good and right for our kids. And we all should want that for ourselves too, even as adults. And so, yeah, really being open minded and flexible and looking at behavior as a signal. So you have to dive deeper, you have to be a detective there. It's really complex,
Yeah,
but
but it's simple though, Penny, and the power of that one word you said, yet.
mhm.
That one word, if there's anything I want the dads and those who love them, our parents, to take away right off the bat is that yet. It's a
Mhm.
powerful thought process. I thank you for blessing us with that concept today. That's huge. Thank you. And I think it's also good for adults too, not just for our young
Yes.
people. I think
Mhm.
you have a universe. We have to talk on. You need to like trademark that, or unless it's already trademarked, you need you can go a lot of miles with that. But I'll let it back
The
to Drew. Go
power
ahead.
the power of
Yeah,
yet.
I loved hearing that as well. And I actually secretly gave myself a little pat on the back because when my twins were really young and they're going to turn 11 this Friday. Um, they would be, like maybe not quite one and a half, two, and they're going to the playground and they want to climb up everything. But I would always say, oh, you're going to get there. You're not quite yet. You're not quite yet ready for that. And so that
Mhm.
was my only little story about yet, but it's not as powerful
Mhm.
as yours because that mindset of knowing that your child can get there and they will get there. So don't stress so much in the present about their, 5 years from now, it's going to be, the end of the world. So really important.
Yeah,
But
we
let's,
parent out of fear. We
unfortunately.
parent out
Yeah.
of fear. So we worry that our kids aren't going to be able to, talk to their boss appropriately later or whatever it is. That's our fear. That's our stuff. It's not their stuff. And we do have to work on determining what's my stuff and what matters to them. What can I do for them? And so that yet is really powerful in alleviating some of that fear.
Yeah. They will get there for sure. So let's talk about this main idea though of, when your child won't go to school, right?
Hmm.
Let's just set what obviously as a parent that's challenging. I've experienced my kids saying to me, I don't feel like going to school today. Sometimes they're more resistant. Sometimes they're like, no, I'm like, they're completely resistant. I'm not going to school. But let's just set the stage on, going into the world of a parent who's got a child who's saying, I'm not going to school, and starting maybe with that mindset. How should we approach this problem that we're presented with as parents?
Yeah. The first thing we have to do is throw out that word won't and replace it with can't.
Okay.
My kid can't go to school today. And here's how you know when it's either a won't or a can't. If you try taking away something they love, if you try a punishment that, for my kid, it was screen time. He loves gaming and screen time. If he was having a hard time going to school, and this is what we did at first because we didn't know any better, right? Okay, you don't have electronics this week, right? Because we need him to go to school because the government says he needs to go to school, right? That's our obligation to make him go to school. And so you get, again, really wrapped up in that fear as a parent, and you know that school is important. And so if I said no electronics for a week and he still couldn't walk out the door, I knew that it was a can't, that no matter what the consequence, no matter how much he was really going to be upset about that consequence, he still couldn't do it. He still couldn't make himself go. And really, when we're talking about kids who have a pattern of school avoidance, it is a can't. There is something going on in that environment that is so toxically stressful or anxiety producing that they cannot force themselves into that environment. Sometimes it's a very particular thing, and if you resolve that thing, then stuff gets better. What I found over the years was that that thing kept changing, right? There would be something that was really hard, we would address it, but something else really hard would come up, right? And so being misunderstood, having needs in that environment that weren't being met makes you not want to go in that environment. If you had to go to work every day, everybody was telling you that you could do better, but you were choosing not to do better, that, you just needed to try harder when you were doing your best. How long until you want to quit? How long until you're looking for another job? Right? And that's where these kids are living. They're living in just this toxic place and they have no control over it. They have no control because we tell them they just have to. And, self advocacy, building that skill can help, but also just having conversations with our kids about what is going on and being, again, flexible and open minded. This is so important. We have to listen, and we talk too much as parents. Like I am constantly saying, stop talking, let them talk to you. And sometimes there's a big, long pause and it's uncomfortable for everyone, right? But I've learned if we just wait long enough, our kids will come around to saying something, anything, some sort of clue. They may not know what's happening specifically, they may not know what they need to change, but just letting them know that it's okay to tell you anything, that you are open. You're not going to judge what they're saying their experiences. You're not going to judge their feelings or their emotions. You're not going to remind them how important school is or that they have to go. You're just going to listen first. That makes a monumental shift in your relationship with your kid, which then helps them to be able to talk to you about this stuff, to come to you when something's going on. If you're saying every time your kid doesn't want to go to school, well, you have to. It doesn't matter what's going on, you have to go. I'm so sorry that it's a struggle, but you have to. They're not gonna open up to you. They're not going to explain their feelings and what's going on inside. So, we have to set the stage for that first to be able to then know how to help them. And there's so many different causes, but really it's anxiety and it's stress and pressure. It always, no matter what the specific causes, it boils down to one or two of those things or both.
Are you a dad who feels like you're juggling a million things at once? Balancing work, family, and personal goals can be overwhelming. But what if there was a solution? That's why we created our new fatherhood community called Dad Mentor. For over 20 years, Dad Central has built practical tools to help dads. We understand the challenges you face and provide the support you need to thrive. The biggest complaint we hear from dads is there's no dedicated support for their specific needs. But not anymore. Our new community, called Dad Mentor, is here to transform your fatherhood experience. Imagine feeling in control, staying calm and patient when your children misbehave. Picture yourself connected to your children, guiding them with confidence and watching them succeed. When you join Dad Mentor, you'll have access to a community of like-minded dads committed to their dad journey, just like you. You'll also get the Dad's Roadmap. This is a step-by-step plan to help you go from unsure to unstoppable as a dad. Monthly masterclasses and Q&A sessions. You'll get answers and know exactly what to do straight from experts. Monthly group meetups that connect dads over common topics. A dad's resource library. Curated webinars, podcasts, or guides built by Dad Central to help you grow as a parent. And finally, you'll also get exclusive members-only offers and events. Now, many dads do try to do this fatherhood thing alone, only to find themselves trapped in frustration and strained relationships. Then they may turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms like drugs, alcohol, or other distractions, leaving their family and their own well-being at risk. We don't want you to reach that point of regret. Take steps to invest in you and your family today. Join Dad Mentor and go from stressed, tired, and overwhelmed to confident, calm, and connected. Join us today by going to dadcentral.ca/dads.
Penny, why do you want us to bring you back for like 3 more shows? You're just like dropping knowledge bombs. Okay. Love the technique about asking a question and staying silent.
Mhm.
I do that with a lot of individuals that I'm accelerating who are adults, and just giving them time, because sometimes it will take time for them to think, a young one,
Mhm.
on what to answer. In your heart work, I don't think it's hard work, I think it's heart work that
Mm,
you're
love that.
doing. Do you find it more challenging for the parents to move forward or for the child to move forward?
Mm. I think that's really individually independent, right? It's based on the individual. I think that for the parents who struggle to sort of move forward, it's a struggle with their past
Mm.
and with sort of bucking traditional norms. And it can be really, really hard to make those mindset shifts. It takes a lot of work. Um, Back, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, I just decided that I was going to work on myself. I was so tired of feeling negative all the time, talking about, ADHD all the time, school struggles all the time. And I just didn't like the narrative in my own head, honestly. I had a very victim mentality, and so I just dove in and started learning. I it started by Googling happiness studies. It was like, "What do people have that I don't have?" And it turned out I had everything I needed. I just wasn't using it. I wasn't thinking about it in the ways that were actually helpful for me. And, that was a years long process to shift my thinking that had developed over 40 some years at that point. I had to really be aware of my thoughts and feelings, very distinctly all day long. I had to keep coming back to it and reminding myself to be aware and thinking about it. So, the first challenge for a parent is just to say, it's okay if I or my kid don't go down a traditional path. One thing for us in the neurodivergent community that we talk about all the time, and this was true for my own kid too, who is now 21, you don't have to go to college to be a successful adult. You don't have to go to four-year university to be a successful adult. You don't have to have good grades in high school to be a successful adult. That's what they tell you. Every teacher every day in high school is drilling to you what you need to do to get into college to be successful, right? It's not true. Like, it's okay to say, I don't subscribe to that belief. I'm going to do things differently. We have to get to that point. That's the big shift for parents and educators, any adult, any caregiver in a kid's life. And then, for kids, what they need is a relationship of trust. They need to understand that they can trust us to be the guide that they need, not to be the controlling authoritarian that they don't need, right? Because when they feel that trust, they will be open, they will be flexible, they will believe that we actually want to help them.
Yeah. Like, Drew, I could go in further, but I'll give it back to you. Penny, you're dropping some serious knowledge bombs, really and
It's
truly.
a whole lot of hard fought and won wisdom, right?
Yep,
Many years, many years.
absolutely. Bless you on all that, Drew. I'll give it back to you, man. There's a lot I want to share, but back to you, man.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, Penny, especially when you talked about breaking out of that traditional path, I go back to this comment you made about fear. We parent from
Mhm.
fear. Either it
Mhm.
was the path that I took, or it was the path that I was told that was needed to go to be successful. Maybe I'm still struggling to be successful through that path and not knowing any other way. And there's a lot of fear that comes, right? There's this gap
Mhm.
between kind of where you think you can get to and where you're told you have to go. Anyway, so I just wanted to mention that. I think that that's probably very real, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
hard to break out of those traditional thought patterns if there's this fear that keeps holding us back. As a coach, the idea of limiting beliefs, these long held beliefs, whether they come internally from yourself or externally from these messages that you've picked up and just somehow created to be true. And there's a great quote from Craig Groeschel in his book, Winning the War in Your Mind. It says, "A lie that we believe to be true will affect your life as if it's true." And I think that's really
Mhm.
relevant for that comment there. This is the path. This is how you do it. My child's not going to be successful if they don't go through this path, which is why you go back to mindset being one of the first steps to being able to shift through this. Okay. So I want to get
Yeah.
back to this idea of school. And, you
Mhm.
were describing a great dynamic of listening and understanding. And, as a dad focused show, dads are listening to this. And I'm not trying to be stereotypical, but a lot of times, you know, dads are focused on results. Dads are focused on getting things done. Dads are focused on providing. Dads are focused on all that. And again, both parents may have those same focuses. But and then often I hear from the family dynamic, mom is really dealing a lot more with the schooling, the school type stuff than dad. So my question is maybe twofold. One, how important is a parenting team and working collaboratively in this process to support each other and support your child? And then second, what role can dads, not that they have to fit it, but how can dads come into this process in a supportive, helpful way from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, first, just showing up, right? I think for all of us, mom or dad, just showing up and being willing to be a part of it. It's tough because so often, as when we're co-parenting, we're never on the same page. We grew up in different
I hope
ways.
not.
We have different values and
I hope to
different
try and get on the
beliefs.
same page. Yeah, that's
But that's the goal. We want to be on the same page.
Yeah,
But we don't start there.
mm,
We're not gonna start there. It's very rare for co-parents to start in parenting on the same page,
right.
yeah,
especially if you have a neurodivergent kid, because you
right.
have to parent completely
Absolutely.
differently than you think you do. And so that struggle just to get on the same page is real. And sometimes it's much, much easier for one person to just sort of step back, right? Instead of having the struggle to get on the same page, how about I just step back here? You've got this. And, consistency and clarity with kids is key. So you do need to have a united front, whether or not you're totally on the same page. And so what I tell parents is like, sit down with each other, really talk through and make a plan of how you're going to approach different things. So, if your kid needs a consequence, right? What's the first thing you're going to do? Um, for me, it's always having a conversation and understanding why that rule was broken or why that behavior happened anyway. I never go to consequences first. Um, that's something that having a neurodivergent kid has taught me. But for dads, like, just ask questions. I remember I was the mom who did the stuff. I took my son to appointments. I went to the school meetings. My husband was an hourly employee and I was self-employed. So it made sense that I had the flexibility to do that. And I overshared a lot at first until I realized that talking about ADHD every moment of every day is not helping anyone. It's not, it isn't the full picture of my kids, so why is it the only thing we talk about, right? But, dads can show up if they're not the person who's going to the meetings and going to the appointments. Just ask, how did it go? What did you talk about? What was the outcome? What did the doctor say? What did the therapist say? What did they add to the IEP or the 504 plan or the school plan when you met with the teacher? So just trying to stay, I think, informed and connected with what is going on if you're not able. If you're able, go to the appointments too, go to the school meetings too. It's really, I think, valuable for the other parent that you're co-parenting with to have someone in their corner, especially in school meetings where you're talking about your kids' struggles. Because often when we go to these meetings, like these IEPs are like special education meetings here in the US, and it's a room full of educators, and then it's you, and it
Yeah.
feels very us versus them, right? So if you can show up as a team, then fantastic. And I think that's always preferable. That's always going to be sort of the best outcome, right? The kid's going to see that you're both there, you're both in it. The school is going to see that you have a united front. You're going to show up for your kid consistently because you're working as a team, right? And so that's really, really powerful. The role for dads, I think, is really dependent on the dad. What do you enjoy? What can you do with your kid? How can you spend time with your kid with something that they enjoy, or maybe introducing them to something you enjoy? When my son was little, he loved woodworking in the garage with his dad. That was something that they both loved and they bonded over and they could do together. Um, as he grew up, things changed, right? And so you just pay attention to what your kid is interested in or into and ask questions about it. Like, my son was really into music and he was actually creating digital music on his iPad at school because it was regulating for him and it helped him when he was feeling sort of really dysregulated, out of whack at school. And so I learned, like, in the car when I would pick him up, I couldn't ask him how his day was. He hated that question. He didn't want to talk about anything that had to do with school, right?
Mhm.
But I could connect with him over music. Hey, why don't you play the latest song you discovered for me? Hook your phone up to the car. Let's listen to that, right? Or what band have you discovered lately that you think I might really like? Something, play that beat that you created when you were at school today so that he felt seen, heard, and understood, right? So dads can do this too. You just have to lean in to what your kid is into and then, try to be part of the team. And it can be especially hard when parents have divorced and you're
Mm.
trying to co-parent in two different households. I kind of want to shout out to those people. We see that that's even harder. But again, as consistent as you can possibly be, the better.
Mm. Yeah, really, I like the point that you made about possibly taking a step back, right? And finding your way together though is
Mhm.
really crucial to that point. Well, I'm curious, Ed. Is it okay if I take one more question and turn it back to you?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So let's say they've shifted the mindset. As a parent, we've listened to, and our child begins to feel seen, heard, and understood, and they're still presenting with this, I don't want to go to school. You
Mhm.
kind of hit the next sort of roadblock, and you're working together as a team. You've established roles, you've got a plan in place. You're even, what now?
Yeah. You know, what I learned to do first was to sit down with pen and paper and have a conversation with my kid about what was going on right then. And I had these conversations verbally for the longest time, and somebody, I think, made a comment on Facebook or something and said, "I've found that actually writing it down makes a huge difference." I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna do that." So I get pen and paper and I'm writing down when he says, "Well, I don't like to dress out in PE in middle school. It's too loud in there, and I don't like to change my clothes in front of people," right? So I'm writing that down. I'm right, and it feels more like we're listening when we write it down than if we're just having a verbal conversation for our kids. It feels more concrete. And then the second step of that, after you have this list, is you go back through and you make a plan. Okay, I'm going to email your PE teacher as soon as we're done here, and I'm going to ask them what they can do to help you with this, right? This other thing that you're struggling with, I think you should have this conversation with your guidance counselor. Can you do that? Or is that okay? Right? And so you're actually showing them that you're going to do something to help with the situation. Because when we just try to push them out the door, we're not helping. We're not changing anything about what's happening. We're not even really saying, I see you. And so, we have to really be that detective, like I talked about earlier, but do it in a way that feels very, very concrete for your kid. And then you start having those conversations with people to try to make accommodation, figure out what's going on. What can we do to alleviate some of what is happening? Um, it could be, for our neurodivergent kids, it could be sensory environment, it could be social struggles with other kids. One point in high school, my kid actually quit going to school altogether for a while because every morning in the cafeteria, which is where they were forced to go before school started, there was a group of kids who were bullying other kids, and he could not stand it. He could not watch it. He tried to intervene, and then they started bullying him, and he was like, I'm done. I can't, because he's so empathetic that it creates a real problem for him to see people being hurt, honestly, right? Which in an environment with a couple thousand teenagers, it happens. And so we had to allow him to not be in that situation for a while. We could have accommodated in the morning. He could have gone to somebody's classroom, right? Like there's other ways to handle that. But he had built up to a point before he was willing to say anything that he just needed to tap out for a while. And he ended up going back after a few months of trying to do it online, which was just before COVID. And then he didn't go for a year and a half and he graduated with a drive through graduation of all things. But he made it, right? And in first grade, I was like, oh my gosh, my kid's never going to finish school, right? I leaned into that fear and it was unfounded. It was hard to get there, but we did get there. And, so we just, again, it's all about leaning into really genuinely seeing, hearing, and understanding what's going on for the kid, and then showing them that we are going to take action to help. We are going to take action to try to change that situation. It's really tough after COVID. There are so many more kids who are avoidant of school now. It's a huge, huge issue. And some of it is just that they're out of practice with having to, do hard things, with having to put themselves in maybe social situations that they haven't had practice at for a while. Maybe they have to make new friends all over again, and that's hard. I think that too, they're behind academically from the experience with COVID. So now the actual learning and academic work might truly be a lot harder and there might be a lot more pressure. So, getting to the bottom of what's going on, but then also showing them concretely that you are going to take action to help, or you're going to find someone in the school that is going to take action to help, or both.
That's
Good
great.
stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the right budging on time, but I do have to have you share before we went and started the push the record button that you're seeing more dads. So do share.
Yes.
I want to hear on that. Let's end up on this conversation, that ray of hope that you're seeing more dads.
Yes, yeah. I've been a parenting coach for quite a few years now, and it was always moms. Every appointment, it was always moms. Then, slowly but surely, a certain percentage, dads would show up with moms. And then it was dads making appointments and dads showing up on their own. And, I will say that probably 50% of the individual work that I do with parents now, that co-parent is coming along,
Nice.
at least on the first appointment or two, right?
Good.
And so there's a shift, and I love it. I'm so
Thank you.
happy about it.
Excellent. Well, we'll end off on that very positive note, and just
Well,
wanting to know.
if possible,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I'm gonna spring this on you quickly. But what is one question that a dad should be asking himself if he's confronted with a child who's wanting to avoid school? And then the follow-up question is, what's one action he should then take on this topic of school avoidance?
The question to ask yourself is, what is really going on here? If it's not, this is a question I teach parents a lot. If it is not what I think it is, laziness, lack of motivation, defiance, just not wanting to, what else could it be? That's the question that opens the door. And then that follow through is, what action can you take from that information now? How can you show up for your kid to actually help them instead of just try to force them to do what, everybody says you should be doing or you have to be doing? Just being willing to question norms is huge. It's huge. And then be flexible. How does your kid get to that happy, successful adult? How would they define it? Is it that they make it to school every single day?
Love
Maybe,
it.
maybe not.
Okay.
Love it. All right.
Perfect. So for those who wanted to find out more or get connected with you, where can they go?
Yeah, go to parentingadhdandautism.com. Everything is linked up there. Our Behavior Revolution program, as well as a summit that we have coming up that's free on behavior starting February 23rd, 2024. And the podcast, you can get linked up there for a Beautifully Complex podcast, but also it's on all of the main places that you are listening to podcasts. Wherever you're listening to this one, you can probably find that one too.
Awesome. Right. Thank you so much, Penny. I really enjoyed the conversation. Really enjoyed just the approach that you're bringing in terms of this idea of mindset. Really crucial. And yet. So thank you so much.
Yeah. So Penny, we want to say thank you and for all the hard work you have done, are doing, and will be doing going forward. If there's anything we can do to support and uplift what you're doing, please feel free to reach out. And as always, we just want to say, don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and make sure you give yourself grace.
Yes.
All
yes.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right, Drew. Wrap up time.
Yeah, it's hard to just land on one thing.
You think?
Yeah, but I think the idea of sometimes a parent stepping back and working really well as a team really stands out, because I'm not sure if other dads are like this or not, but I'm very much, obviously I'm very proactive. I really want to, be ahead of the game. I do my research. I invest in it. Maybe intense sometimes, but that could be a problem. So that idea of stepping back is something that really resonates for me. So I've noticed any other intense dads out there, really passionate, really want to see their kids, and maybe it's time for that step back and just
Yeah.
take
Well,
it easier.
I'll build on that. I'll build on what you said. And one other thing, one of the things when I do other conversations, one of the things I end off with is sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. I just leave with that. Uh, Penny drops so many knowledge rounds. I love so many things. But one thing's asking a question and keeping quiet. Very, very, very important thing, because many of us, when we ask a question, we want an answer in 3 seconds. We do that a lot of times with adults, and unfortunately, we do that a lot of times with children. They need time to process. Give them that time. Just be quiet and just say, I'm waiting for an answer. I'm giving you the space to come back with an answer. I think silence can be very, very powerful at times, whether you're adults or dealing with children. Very, very powerful. So many, many knowledge bombs dropped today, but let's wrap it up. The Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. We would love to hear from you. So email address podcast@dadcentral.ca. Hey, guest suggestions, feedback, we like to hear it all. Also, our podcast, dadcentral.ca/podcast. And then finally, website, we have a lot of free resources at dadcentral.ca. So as always, I'd like to say thank you for taking time, the most valuable thing you have, to listen, watch the epic conversation that we have. Share it out, tell people about it. And as always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy. And remember to give yourself grace. Take care, everybody. Be well.